lot of places right now it is extremely hot, and with even swimming, but especially with roading or free running. Dr. Joe, would you just kind of just go through what that looks like in terms of signs to look out for and how to know when your dog is potentially uh, in trouble heat wise?
Yeah. And the one thing I'd add about the water too is the depth of water, right? So, swimming in a lake, that water temperature is going to be nice and cool. Using splash water, especially when you have multiple days of heat, can cause that to be warm. So, being conscious of the water work that you're doing is super important. That's just what I was just going to tag on to the previous discussion is making sure that you're aware of that. With a dog that's starting to overheat, what we're going to notice is that tongue is going to get really extended out of its mouth. It gets really flat. They're trying to move a lot of air, so it's not that hot or excited pant that at the end of a hunt. This is almost a roaring because they're trying to get that mouth as open as wide as possible and get that air moving. You'll start noticing the saliva get really ropey and thick because two things: they're maybe getting a little dehydrated. They're also not taking the time to swallow because all they want to do is try to move air and cool down. And then for me, I think it's the look in the eyes. And so they have a boss, I'm in trouble look. It's a completely different look than just a warm dog. And when you get that look, it's time to start the cooling mechanism and get that dog cooled down, shut things down, and start addressing that. And so I think understanding your dog is important, and understanding like when they get too warm. The other thing that I advocate for people to do is understanding what their dog's working temperature is. And so, you get these hot days, you get your dog nice and warm, but he's not even close to being overheated. Slap the thermometer in to get an idea of what your dog's running temperature is, so that when you do get into trouble, you're aware of where a starting point might be and in what direction you need to go from there. So it's really important to understand all these things before you actually get into the moment with an overheated dog.
Yeah, for sure. And Dr. J, I know we did another webinar on Monday for the pointing dog people, and Dr. J, you had some great insight there. I would love to hear that as well around heat.
For the overheating dogs. Yeah. So I think that the most important thing is to remember that when their body temperatures get to a point where they're no longer coming down on their own. So some of these dogs can come off at 109, 110, and that can be a normal working temp. But if they are not cooling, and like Dr. Joe said, you have that thermometer in and you're seeing that temperature rise instead of come down, you're getting yourself in trouble. And the most important thing is cooling that dog as quickly as possible. So using ice water, using fans to try to help that airflow, using a water bottle that you can spray the back of their throat to help break up that thick mucus. All of those things help cool, but the most important thing is to immediately start to cool the dog and take that body temperature every minute to 2 minutes to make sure it's coming down. Typically, I will maintain cooling. So that would be ice or ice water or cold water. Even if I have a pond close to me, I'm going to immerse the dog in the water until that dog is around 103 degrees. And then I'm going to pull all that cooling away and then simply just, add access to water, maybe keep the fan on the dog at that point. But the most important thing is the faster we get that core body temperature down, the better for the dog long term.
And I think just to echo a couple of things that she mentioned, ice water, ice, and water. And unfortunately, there is a lot of misinformation coming out where people say you can't use those things, that you should use rubbing alcohol. And I think it needs to be reiterated. Like, those of us in this world use ice and ice water and cool those dogs down. And so it disheartens me when I see emails come out or other information where you can't use those things. It absolutely is untrue, especially when you're out in the field with the dog. Those are going to be the two things that you're going to usually have access to. And then the third is the air movement. So whether that's a crate fan or getting them in the vehicle with the fan blowing across them. And so it's getting them cooled down, getting that water against their body, and then moving air. And I don't know where this shift happened, but it seems like there's a lot of information out there saying, oh, you can't use water, you can't use ice, you got to use rubbing alcohol. And it just could not be further from the truth. You just got to get that dog cooled down.
Yeah. For sure. And Josh, actually, I think I saw a while ago one of your videos. You had a great tactic for cooling dogs, especially in the kennel.
Yeah, one of the things, especially when we're on the road, so this came back, when we were really trialing a lot, you're on the road a lot, and dogs are in the box a lot. We always had cots that you had inside for the dogs to lay on. And, the cots just made it to where you're just like, in the winter, we'd want something, even straw, something that the dogs can lay on and kind of collect that heat. We like the cots because there could be air underneath them. But when we were traveling, what I would do is I'd stop and just get bags of cubed ice at the gas station and kind of break it up and just throw it underneath those cots, and you just kind of kept that that underbelly of that dog cool without them actually having to lay in the ice, of course. And then of course when you start moving, now you have airflow in there too. And so just when you're traveling, I think that can kind of be taken for granted, for when we're traveling, and then you just think there's air movement and the dog should just be cooling down. And obviously that may not be the case depending on where it is that you're living. And I'm really glad that Dr. Spoon, Dr. J, mentioned that, because we have heard in our circles the same stuff that Dr. Spoon just mentioned, that you can't use ice water and you can't use these things. Well, and the reality is that how often are those of us are actually carrying rubbing alcohol instead of being somewhere where we can actually get the dog cooled down. I think people overthink and panic rather than just getting that dog cool. And so knock on wood, I've only seen it a handful of times, but I can tell you when I've seen it, it has not been a fun thing to see.